Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Are LGBTQ donors still saying I do after marriage equality? For those of you who are returning Grant Space webinar participants, a warm welcome back. And to those of you here for the first time, I'm so glad you're joining us today. A little bit about me. My name is Christine Bunting, and I'm the Curriculum Design Manager here at Candid, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Elizabeth Zavada. Together, we will be supporting today's webinar by managing polls, as well as collecting questions you ask along the way and posing them during the Q&A. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, we want to share with you that we've joined forces with GuideStar to form a new single organization called Candid. Together, we have over 88 years of experience in the nonprofit sector. Every year, millions of nonprofits spend trillions of dollars around the world. Candid finds out where that money comes from, where it goes, and why it matters. We believe that an effective social sector is critical for a thriving society, and we believe in the importance of solutions for the sector, by the sector. With Candid, nonprofits, foundations, donors, and the public can all be on the same page. With Candid, you can find funding with Foundation Directory online and search for 140,000 funders and 12 million grants, and increase your visibility with the funder community by creating or maintaining your GuideStar nonprofit profile. You can also continue to strengthen your nonprofit by participating in grant-based trainings to move your fundraising skills to the next level. To learn more about our capacity building training programs, you can visit grantspace.org. We offer courses across the country at a location near you. I'd now like to turn over the controls to our presenters, Tony Beal and Denise Spivak. So just a moment while I do that, handing it over to you, Tony, there, so that they can display their presentation. Beautiful. As they take the reins, I'd like to introduce them. Tony is, I'm thrilled to have them both here today. Tony is a trusted and award-winning social enterprise leader celebrating 20 years of diverse nonprofit experience, serving organizations all across the United States. His guidance and leadership have catapulted organizations to greater levels of sustainability, community engagement, and mission relevance. Denise Spivak joined Centerlink after working in the private sector for over 20 years. She has extensive experience in team management, talent acquisition, and program development. Prior to joining Centerlink, Denise was a corporate executive recruiter. Her background also includes on-air and production roles in the broadcast industry and senior retail management positions with Fortune 500 companies. Denise currently serves on a number of local nonprofit boards and committees focused on the LGBTQ+ arena. Denise is a graduate of Gettysburg College, where she received a BA in psychology, and she has also received certification from BoardSource as a governance trainer, SAGE as a trainer for the National Resource Center on LGBT Aging, and has completed Blanchard Situational Leadership Training, Zenger Miller Leadership Training, and Broward County Community Foundation's Boards in Action Training. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Tony Beal and Denise Spivak.
Well, great, Christine. Thank you so much for that awesome introduction. And Denise, no wonder why we needed you part of this webinar today. So thank you too for joining us.
Thank you for having me. And I really need to cut down that introduction, but thank you.
Not at all, not at all. You've earned every bit of it. So again, just really glad that we had this opportunity to collaborate today and bring Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, Candid, and Centerlink together. It's really a tremendous partnership here and providing this information to our attendees. So our table of contents for today, we're going to first talk a little bit about the 2019 Giving USA report. Then we'll talk about features of giving by LGBTQ households, current trends in LGBTQ giving in small and large markets, and then prospecting LGBTQ donors in your community. So that's what we're going to be covering in today's webinar. So first, the 2019 Giving USA report. So most of you are probably familiar with this report. It comes out every year. It is researched and written by the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, Giving USA, the Giving Institute, and actually our partners at Candid participate in this research as well. So we'll probably see, I guess, the end of spring, beginning of summer. We'll see the 2020 report, which will have all of the data from 2019. But this was the most current and relevant information that we could provide to our attendees today, just to give you an overall look at what philanthropy looked like over 2018. So again, Giving USA, just a little bit more about it. It's the longest running annual report on U.S. charitable giving, published by the Giving USA Foundation, and began in 1956. So this gives you a good overall picture of giving in 2018. So $427 billion given to philanthropic causes in the U.S. in 2018. You'll see here 18% to foundations, 9% bequests, 5% corporations, and 68% individuals. This is why it is so important as fundraisers that we invest time in the relationships that we have with donors. Because as you can see, if you combine bequests and individuals, such a large portion of the giving pie really rests in individuals and their connectivity and passion to your individual organizations.
Hey, Tony, I hate to interrupt your flow, but we got a great question in chat that I definitely in the future want to integrate into our housekeeping slides. We got a question from Caitlin just asking if we, the presenters, can share our pronouns. So I'll just briefly say hi again there. I'm Christine. My pronouns are they, them.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tony. Mine are him, his.
And I'm Denise. Mine are she, hers.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Tony, and thanks, Caitlin, for your question.
Yeah, great question, Caitlin. It's funny, Christine. I thought about that too as we were putting this together. So I'm glad our attendees are keeping us real with that. So thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
And you can interrupt my flow anytime.
Thanks, Tony.
No, of course, because usually in all of my presentations and workshops, I always say the only house rule is that you interrupt me constantly. So I'm glad that our attendees are posing questions already. That's great. So let's see. So again, this gives us all a really good snapshot of overall giving in these main categories. Then we have this opportunity through this research to take a little bit of a deeper dive, right? So you can see here that out of the $427 billion, 29% of that goes towards religious institutions, 14% to education, and so on. I think what's so incredibly interesting and an incredible opportunity for us in the LGBTQ community and as fundraisers in this community is that, our community is touched by every single one of these segments, right? We're touched by religion, by education, by health, by arts and culture, environmental issues. So there's an opportunity not only for us as philanthropists to participate in all of these areas, but certainly as we look to support funding within our organizations and potential programs, all of these fit within the LGBTQ community. So again, it's just an interesting statistic to take a look at, and I just feel like the more information we have, the better armed we are as we go out and solicit donations. So again, just wanted to share with you the Giving USA statistics again overall, and then this particular breakdown, in terms of the different buckets that these investments are being made in. So now we're going to step into a little bit here, the features of giving by LGBTQ households. And this was really interesting as we put this together. You'll see here a 2018 study was done by a researcher from Seattle University that looked at the financial management and charitable decision-making among lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender households. And I really want to stress that this was, again, done based on households, not based on individual LGBTQ giving. In fact, there was very little data that I could find in putting this together that was cumulative data around giving trends specifically for LGBTQ individuals. And I have a little more information to share about that in an upcoming slide. But what that particular study found is that unlike heterosexual couples, same-sex couples are less likely to exercise joint management of their financial resources, preferring instead to maintain individual accounts with independent control. Also, same-sex couples philanthropy does not necessarily align with the household's financial management system, with many couples giving jointly as well as separately. And same-sex couples philanthropy often reflects shared values and sometimes has the goal of increasing recognition of the LGBT community in mainstream society. So I've been with my now husband for 27 years. We've had joint checking accounts, I believe, within the first year of us being together, but we still make very separate decisions around our philanthropic giving, and often don't have those conversations unless it's going to be some really substantial gift. Don't really have a conversation prior to either one of us individually making some type of commitment to an organization that we're passionate about, in our community. So, for example, here in South Florida, the Smart Ride, I give consistently every year to the Smart Ride and sponsor ride teams. But usually it's at dinner where I'll say, "Oh, hey, honey, just want to let you know that I sponsored this team for $250 today." So definitely within my own household, this study proves true to the extent that we make those individual decisions and very rarely have a conversation ahead of time before we make that commitment. Denise, I don't want to talk too much. Do you want to share how this works in your household and whether or not that kind of supports or contradicts what this particular study found?
Well, and yeah, I'm happy to. My wife and I have been together 27 years and married for going on 5 years now. We have had joint accounts pretty much since we'd been together for, I don't know, 6 months to a year once we started living together, which will beg some lesbian jokes about U-Hauls, but we'll just stop that. Um, so, but the truth of the matter is, we really have always discussed donations, and generally, just because of how we generally work for and with and support the same organizations. So we've never really had things that we were very different on in terms of support here and there, but generally we are on the same track on that.
Okay, super. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So also in doing some of the research, I took a look at large and local foundations and just to get a sense of what they were focusing on in terms of the programs and services that they were funding, just kind of making a natural assumption that the donors that are contributing to these foundations also are passionate and supportive of the areas in which these foundations are investing their funds. So the first one I took a look at was the Beal Foundation, and with Google, everyone can take a look at that on their own. The Beal Foundation offers some national funding. Their primary focus right now really is on equality around sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. So we can make the natural assumption that those donors that are supporting the Beal Foundation, and therefore the funds being distributed by the Beal Foundation, are totally aligned there in terms of their granting priorities. Another great resource, and this was new to me, so forgive me if it's totally old news to everyone else out there attending. And Denise, you were great in bringing this to my attention, but Lgbt Funders, and their website is lgbtfunders.org. They have a lot of incredible reports and studies that they've done on LGBTQ employment within the philanthropic sector, and also some great reports on U.S. Foundation giving in the LGBTQ arena. So, for example, the most recent information I could find there from their 2017 report is that there was $185 million contributed by U.S. foundations that supported LGBTQ organizations and programs across the country. So again, as fundraising professionals and as we're looking beyond the relationship fundraising that we're doing, this is great information for us to have as we're prospecting potential foundations to support our organizations. And then locally here in South Florida, I took a look at Our Fund. So their website is our-fund.org. And so very much like the graph that we saw for Giving USA, that breakdown of giving, ourfund.org is really focused on serving a large spectrum of the LGBTQ community. So for example, their funds support youth, elder, women's, transgender, HIV/AIDS, art and culture, and social justice. So again, that gives you just a little bit of an understanding, an example of the different foundations out there, the different resources that are available as you continue to kind of research funding opportunities for your LGBTQ organizations or for the programming that you have within your organization that is focused on the LGBTQ community. So just wanted to share that with you. So Denise, this part of the webinar, the spotlight moves to you, and we're going to have a great conversation about LGBTQ giving in large and small markets, and like I said earlier, there's not a lot of consolidated data around LGBTQ individual giving. So the thought process here was that, you know, Denise and the great work that Centerlink is doing in their connectivity to community centers around the country gives us a really great kind of boots on the ground perspective of what's happening in local communities as it relates to funding of LGBTQ programs and services. So Denise, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Tony. So maybe a start here is to say a little bit about Centerlink, and we are the we're the Association of LGBT Community Centers, and for lack of a better parallel, we're kind of a chamber of commerce for the centers. We provide training, technical assistance, networking, and just general connectivity, resources, and something that we do every 2 years in collaboration with the Movement Advancement Project is to do a community center survey report. And so our last one was in 2018, which is what I'll be referencing a lot in this section. But we have a new one coming out later on this year that we're really excited about. Talking about foundations, it was interesting when I was looking at the funders' new report from 2017 that of the 20 top grant recipients in 2017 from foundations, 2 of them were LGBTQ centers. The top one being the New York Center, and the number 13 being the Los Angeles LGBT Center. One of the few times Los Angeles is not number 1. But I think, and I really appreciate you bringing us in on this, Tony, because I think that community centers really are a great representation of what is happening at the local level, because that is where they are, and centers touch more LGBTQ people in communities every day than any other organization out there. The really great news going into 2018 was that in 2017, revenue at centers actually increased. And coming out of an election year, it was a little tenuous. We didn't think that was going to happen. We thought for sure it would go down. But the small centers actually experienced a remarkable 44% increase in revenue from 2016 to 17. And large centers saw a 17% increase. When you break down the numbers at the slide that you're looking at, um, where you see that small centers really comprise a large number, percentage-wise, of all centers that are in existence, those numbers might seem a little bit strange. But Tony, if you go to the next slide, we see why. And that is that most large centers, where they get a good bulk of their revenue, when you put it all together, is really from grants and foundations, and a little bit less from individual contributions. And uh, the the grant situation at the local level is something that, at least from the federal level, which so many of our larger centers get a lot of federal grants, uh, that has been a real challenge. The state and local grants, depending on where you are in the country, have actually either stayed pretty stable or kicked up a bit. But the large federal grants, and we're talking a lot about HIV grants, which so many of our older centers are actually built on, those have changed a lot or gone away, and so it's been a bit challenging for that money to be made up in other ways, or for new grants to come along. So the question and the title here is, after I do, are funders still funding? Um, and I've been on a soapbox about this for many years, because once we got marriage equality, and once Ellen was on TV, a lot of the larger funders, foundation and private, said, "Oh my gosh, we're good. Everything's good. I'm off." And there was so much left to do in communities and on the national spectrum, and we weren't good. And there's still so much to be done when we talk about youth homelessness, when we talk about food insecurity, when we talk about our seniors who are having to go back in the closet. There's still so much work to be done. And so we have seen some funders come back into the fold, but the disappearance has been very impactful. There are a lot of funders out there who, we jokingly behind the scenes, we say they have moving targets, because they change their priorities, if not every year, every few months. So it's really hard for the centers, and local agencies to know where to apply anymore. With a lot of funders, it's by invite only, and for smaller centers, and smaller organizations, very difficult to get those invites. They just don't have those kind of connections. So I'd say that when we're talking about funding in the communities, and where we're seeing it come from, I think the centers are really starting, and it's a push that we're all doing, starting to make a much bigger focus on individual donors, to get general operating money. That is the hardest money that any of our centers get. It's few and far between, and individual contributions are the only way to get that. So um, so
Right.
that's kind of a big broad overview, and I'm happy to go into a little bit more detail on any part of that. But I will say that uh, there's no greater gift to to an organization than general operating funds. And we actually work with a foundation that has started a program, and if it's possible to find a foundation that will do this, and they've asked to remain anonymous, because if not, everybody would be running their way. Um, but they are working on a program with us, which provides our smaller centers with $50,000 annual grants for general operating, to be able to do those things that they're not able to put into program grants, like get a bookkeeper, an administrative assistant, things that are just going to help them to move the organization forward. And that has been having such a profound impact, on the growth of those centers. And I think that's really where we need to start heading funders, as they turn their focus back in.
Thank you, Denise.
Super.
Sorry, if I can jump in just with a clarifying question.
Of course.
So we got a question from Danielle asking if you can speak to, there's that 38% program piece on this slide. Can you speak to what exactly is meant by program income?
Yeah, the program income, it can be multifold. Some centers have programs that they actually charge money for, and those, I would not say that those are many. Mostly that is program related grant money. So
Got
it's
it,
coming
got it.
from maybe foundations, but usually and more likely individual donors, probably at a larger level, that are giving at for a specific program. So it's earmarked money. It's money that traditionally, I will say, it comes from around HIV and medical testing or mental health programming. So it's very specific earmarked money that that can only be used for that purpose.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. So very different from the general operating support you were speaking to.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question and great explanation. So, so Denise, we're going to have an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper in our conversation around large markets and small markets and what you might be hearing from your centers in those two markets. But before we go there, we actually have a poll for our attendees because we want to keep everybody engaged and awake. So we're going to move into our poll now.
All right, great. So our question, as you can see on the slide, is: are you seeking LGBTQ plus donors in a large or small market? So I will launch large, small, or both. So I'll launch that now, and maybe we can also just briefly speak to maybe a quick definition of what small versus large means.
So I can tell you for the purposes of our survey, we traditionally call small organizations 150,000 or less, and then large anything over, which is not a great definition, to be honest with you.
Okay, okay.
It just, and the reason we made that break is because for the questions that we were asking around funding and finance, we found that the centers that were 150,000 or less just didn't have answers and they didn't apply. So that's where we made that break. I would say in general, you know, we'd probably look at the 1 to 2 million and below as small and large.
Okay, okay, great. Well, I see about 60% of the room is voted, so I'll give you another just 5 seconds or so to lock in your final answers. And just confirming, when we say market, we mean community that you're working in. Is that correct?
I would say yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Just clarifying based on the question we got in on chat. All right, well, it looks like nearly 80% of the room has voted, which is awesome. So I will go ahead and close that poll and share the results. So it looks like we have 44% of the room who are seeking LGBTQ plus donors in a large market. 32% are looking at both small and large, and 24% in small. So with that, I will hand it back over to you two. Welcome your thoughts.
Well, great, thank you. Yeah, and really the whole purpose of the poll really was just to get a sense from our attendees where their focus areas are within their communities. I don't know that I feel strongly one way or the other about how that you know, how those results came out, but definitely Centerlink and Denise, you have, you know, great representation across the country, you know, with centers that are definitely serving these populations and doing it very successfully.
Yeah, and I'm fascinated by the organizations that are working both markets, and I feel for you. That is definitely not easy. You know, and Tony, we might be getting into this a little deeper later, but I think one of the things that we're seeing, well, first of all, we're seeing, especially with foundations, I think a bigger push towards work around diversity and cultural inclusivity. But the other thing that we're seeing is a real focus on the South. LGBTQ funders are very focused on work in the South, especially at the larger or national levels, larger market levels, and national, and a real desire to see collaborative funding. So organizations working together towards a common goal, and so that's something that we try and work with our centers on. But I think as organizations are working in all of those markets, I think that is definitely something that funders are turning towards and showing a great preference for.
Sure, and that's not unique to the LGBTQ community, right? I mean, that's across the board. Funders are looking for collaboration,
Right.
and definitely we've seen it. You may have seen this, Denise, in the recent release of the LGBTQ funding from our Community Foundation of Broward. They
Hmm.
were actually seeking to fund, for lack of a better term, mainstream organizations that were looking to expand their services to the LGBTQ community, as
Right.
opposed to funding LGBT community or organizations that are already serving the community. So
Hmm.
they had a very interesting kind of different inclusivity um, take on that particular RFP for that funding, which was very different than what they've done in the past.
Right. And that's it's also really kind of a trend I'm seeing as well, that a lot of the LGBTQ funding is coming from non-LGBTQ funders. The traditional ones that we've always known are getting very sort of laser focused in certain areas or certain topics, whereas now we're seeing some mainstream funders come through with opportunities that well, basically medium and larger, but sometimes smaller market organizations can actually fit into, and bring an LGBTQ focus to, which is being embraced by mainstream funders. So I think we're seeing it's kind of a full circle, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's great and very interesting. So let's talk about the larger markets. So I'm curious because what you said was very interesting about being laser focused. So do you feel like with the community centers that are serving in these large markets, it, are their fundraising initiatives and the programs that they're offering more laser focused than perhaps the smaller markets where there aren't as many resources, and so the center is seeking funding for a multitude of programs because they are the entity, as opposed to larger markets where these organizations can kind of share in addressing the needs of the community.
Yeah, and it is. It's a very it's kind of, comparing apples to Ritz crackers. It's while the centers have basically the same ultimate goal, which is serving the LGBTQ community, the way that they provide services and the capacity that they have is so different. If you look at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, which is the largest LGBT organization in the world, how they seek funding, the kind of funding they get is going to be so different from the center that we work with in uh, Pocatello, Idaho, or in Memphis, Tennessee. It's the staffing size is different. Their ability to provide the number of programs, and also who else they have in their community that they can partner with. The center I mentioned in Memphis, Tennessee, they not only serve more than one county, they actually serve 3 states because of where they're positioned. Um, so
Sure.
so I think, and especially for a center like that, it's while there's great opportunity as a result of that, there's also great challenge, because a local funder who might be interested in them doing work in one market isn't necessarily going to be that supportive of them then taking that money to do work in 2 other states. So I think it really is a whole different juggling, and I think with large markets, uh, their their pool is so much bigger on so many levels, and as you saw in the chart before of where they get their funding, I mean, they usually have a much more diverse pool of funding with government grants coming from state, local, and regional, from foundation grants coming from maybe not just one, but maybe 12 foundations. And their fundraising events cost a lot more, but they also make a lot more. So really totally different different picture for them.
Mm-hmm. And then just, trying to tie this all into the theme of today's webinar, are LGBTQ donors still saying I do? And these larger, and again, using the LA Center as a great example, with the passing of marriage equality, have they seen a drop in support? Or have folks, or do you know, or have folks reshifted that, their commitment, to align more with gender equality and gender identity and expression?
I believe that the folks who give to LGBT centers are invested in uh, that community base, and so I think there was perhaps a I'll call it momentary. Obviously, it wasn't like minutes. We were talking more about months and maybe even a couple of years. Um, Shift to a degree in individual giving, and I would have to bring their development people in to give you, the actual uh, truth on what that means. But I think we saw that across the board. I think we did see some individuals who went with the the line that okay, we're good, and followed some of those major funders off track. But I think we've seen a lot of them come back, and I think we've also seen a lot of new donors come in, new individual donors come in, who saw what happened, who saw a lot of people leaving, who saw the need, and they have come in as a result of our larger centers stepping back and taking a look at how they engage individual donors, and coming up with new and more effective ways to communicate with donors, to engage them, and to keep them involved and engaged so that they keep giving.
Mm-hmm. And I reflect back on my own experiences. Gosh, Denise, like 19 years ago now, I think it was, where when I was the executive director of the GLCC here
Hmm.
in South Florida, and the organization then was very much what you had said earlier. I mean, the bulk of our funding came from federal grants that were about HIV programming. That's really what kept the center open, many nights.
Hmm.
But part of the challenge then, and it's probably, I don't think that challenge has necessarily changed, although, I sense that the opportunity in terms of the diverse amount of programming that you can invest in now, back then, the folks that had the capacity to give were not necessarily the folks that needed the
Hmm.
services being provided by the center. And so there was always, the challenge always was making that connectivity in terms of, how their commitment to the center enhances and increases the quality of life for the entire community,
Hmm.
even though the donor, him or herself or themselves, may not, uh, you know, feel like they need anything that the center's offering.
That's very true, and I think we find that so many of our larger donors are not the people who use the services of our organizations, and I'll go even outside of centers to make that statement. Um, but I was talking with a very experienced center leader who said, we're the first out generation that is nearing retirement now, and we have a lot of folks who are looking at legacy bequests. They're looking at where their money's going, and you were asking if there's a shift towards gender identity and youth, and I think it's still that how does it impact me, and folks are looking at their coming out, and wouldn't it have been great if they had an LGBTQ center, or for those that did, how that LGBTQ center changed their lives, and in some cases saved their lives. So I think the ability to engage those donors, whether or not they actually use the center, is there's a broad ability to engage. But you use the word diverse, and I'm going to take it out of where we usually use it around cultural, and I'm going to move it to funding, and
Mm-hmm.
creating those diverse funding streams, is
Mm-hmm.
a diversity we also have to focus on, because the as you were saying, back 20 plus years ago, it was those big grants that carried us, and that was about it. Now it's imperative that there be a diverse funding stream, because so many of us got bitten in the butt by only having one, maybe two funding streams, and losing one of them. And so our centers are learning that early now, and it's something that we keep preaching, and it's something that that I keep hearing every funding conference that I go to, every time I hear people talking about funding. It's that diversification and making sure that one hit will not, and one downturn in the economy will not be the ruin of our organizations.
Right, right, absolutely, and I'm really glad you just mentioned something, and it's not necessarily the theme of today's webinar, but it certainly underscores the fact that, you know, again, our funding streams have to be diversified, and as a nonprofit fundraising professional, you're missing out on some opportunities if you don't have some sort of planned giving program or opportunity for folks to engage in your organization at a legacy level.
Agreed.
Because
Agreed.
because more so now than ever, like you're saying, LGBTQ open, LGBTQ individuals are in this space now where they're retiring and they're looking at their legacy planning.
Yeah. Yeah, and this really is the first, as I mentioned, this is the first generation that we're looking at to be able to address that with. So so when we look at our donors still saying I do, I think they are, and but they're saying I do in different ways now, and legacy giving's now a part of that. So
Right, super. So wanted to go ahead. I mean, we've talked very broadly, I think, about both large and small markets. So before I jump into, you know, prospecting donors, that part of this webinar, anything specific to mention about small markets, since we have this gorgeous slide?
small markets, small market organizations really make up the bulk of our membership, and I know of so many LGBTQ organizations and LGBTQ serving organizations. I think when we get there, the grants are especially challenging. The foundations are especially are more challenging. Um, there might be a local grant that comes through, and for a lot of our centers, I know small local grants or being included as a sub grantee have been vital to helping to launch centers to that next level. But but I would say really it's not looking at those large federal grants. It's not looking at anything past the smaller local grants, the foundation grants. If they fund smaller organizations, the Gamma Mu Foundation is one foundation that is
Yeah.
so wonderful in supporting smaller organizations. But going back to the theme of what we're talking about today, it is individual donors, and it's really about learning to tell your story. We found that a lot of our smaller market agencies, the biggest challenge for them was they didn't even know how to talk about their agency. So engaging those people, they're out there. People have money, but you need to be able to tell them why they need to give, and that's the challenge that we're trying to work with our smaller agencies to be able to do to get to those donors, because I'll still say it. They are saying I do. They are.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we love hearing that. This has been really super informative to me. So thank you for all of your insight. And again, just, you know, mad props and shout out to all of the centers around the country who, you know, again, are right there on the front lines, you know, serving their communities, and especially in those more kind of rural settings, like you said, in Memphis, where I'm sure they're serving Arkansas, Mississippi, and Tennessee. You know, and the huge opportunity and burden that comes along with making that type of commitment to your community. So really,
Thanks.
really good stuff.
Thanks, Tony.
If it's
And
okay, I'm going to go.
can I just toss in one thing that I wanted to make sure I mentioned, and I was going to forget, but the one thing that has also been really great for the smaller centers has been the giving days, specifically Give Out Day, but also, you know, like a Giving Tuesday or any of those local giving days. They have proven just incredibly helpful. I had a new center that I talked to today, brand new, so small, but in 24 hours they raised $34,000 in their giving day, and it was 508 individual donors that were brand new. So I just wanted to do a shout out to the Give Out Days. So.
Wow, and what a pool of potential donors moving forward, right? That they can move up the ladder. So that's really exciting.
Exactly.
That's a great story.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Tony.
Thanks. No, of course. So you're not going anywhere. So
I'm here.
Denise will be here for additional Q&A, and please interject as I go through the prospecting piece of today's webinar. So we're going to talk about prospecting LGBTQ plus donors and different methods for that. So this all comes from the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy's cause selling cycle. And Candid is a really valued and trusted partner with the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy, and offering a lot of the curriculum that's provided through the Institute. So with cause selling is an 8-step cycle that curriculum that we've created, and really just to kind of define what cause selling is, because that may be some new terminology for some of our attendees, is that really we look at cause selling as the process of seeking out potential donors who have a need, interest, and passion for your cause, assisting them to recognize and define that need, and then showing or demonstrating to them how your cause fulfills that need and inspiring them to donate to your cause. So that really, is the essence of cause selling and what we call our cause selling cycle, which is really kind of an 8-step cycle to securing a donor gift. And the first step in that 8-step cycle is prospecting. And so that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today, and the different methods of prospecting. So the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy curriculum really is designed for emerging fundraisers and folks that are new in the fundraising space. So the hope today through this is that, for our new emerging fundraisers that are attending, they'll learn a lot of new strategies or things that they may not have thought of, that they can implement that'll help them in prospecting new donors for their organization. And then for those of us that have just been around forever, hopefully there will be something here that'll just remind you of an activity or initiative that you may have put on the back burner, or at least kind of give you a tremendous affirmation that you're doing all of the right things, and kind of your prospecting strategy for new donors. So I just wanted to kind of set that up. So I'm going to go through quickly the 10 methods of prospecting so that we've got plenty of time for Q&A. Again, for those of you that have been in this game for a while, some of these are maybe standard practices for you. For others, this may be something new and exciting. But one of the obvious methods of prospecting really is referrals, right? I think we're all pretty used to what a referral is. It's someone really making that initial contact for you, making that introduction. Referrals can be so valuable, right? Because typically they come along with some credibility. So whoever is making the referral for you, that person that they're referring you to already has some sort of relationship or trust with the individual that's making the referral. So they're more willing to have an initial conversation with you. So don't be afraid, to ask for referrals if you're not already doing that. Some things that you want to ask when you ask for referral, of course, is, will they be doing the introduction? Are they just going to be providing you with the name and contact information? And then if so, what's the best way for you to contact the referral? And then when to ask for referrals, really just, ongoing throughout your conversation with your existing donors and your existing stakeholders. Don't be shy about asking them to support you and let them know that you're building your database of potential donors and would love some referrals that you could add to that that list of prospects. Sometimes folks don't want to give referrals, and that's totally fine too. They may want to have a soft conversation with the individual first and then make the referral as opposed to just making a blind referral for you. Tapping into number 2 here, your tapping into folks that have a large circle of influence and tapping into your circle of influence, right? So these are individuals that, are very influential with a significant number of individuals in your community. Someone that has a large circle of influence is willing to give you names, again, offering you referrals. And typically those referrals are somewhat qualified prospects for you. So really looking at who in your community, who do you know that have, these existing large circles of influences that you can tap into. And that's not always the person that can write the check. So, being open-minded, there are a lot of folks, in your community that have a large circle of influence because of what the work that they do in the community, how often they may go to networking events. They've got this tremendous, and I'll say it, Rolodex of folks that they can introduce you to. So I say that because, again, I've done a lot of successful things in my fundraising career, but I've also made a lot of mistakes. And one of the mistakes I made early on was not recognizing the large network and influence that folks have in our community who are not necessarily the large donors and the ones that are writing the big checks. Then, talking about event prospecting, the real power of the event often lies in your follow-up with attendees. So, recognizing how you can capture contact information for attendees at your events, and then kind of prospecting that list and determining where they fit in terms of your priorities. And after these slides, I'm going to show you a great prospecting tool that will help you kind of categorize the folks that you've prospected. Again, this is a list. When we talk about prospecting, this is a list of individuals that you're creating as potential folks for you to reach out to and approach to be donors and support your organization and the great work that you're doing in your community. So again, event prospecting, I can speak to about South Florida, very heavy on events here in our community. So if we don't have some mechanism or strategy in place to capture event participant information or connect with them at the event so that then we can continue the conversation ongoing, there's some missed opportunities there. Of course, some of the obvious prospecting, whatever the opportunities are through any direct mail campaigns that your organization is doing. Again, well-targeted campaigns. I guess the caveat here, I'm not a social media or communications guru, but I know enough to know that your messaging needs to be different based on your targeted audience. So again, we can't put together one communication piece and one messaging piece and think that that's going to be attractive or connect with the diverse population that we're reaching out to. So again, just making sure that our messaging and the audience that we're sending this messaging to is very specific and very targeted. And then social media, don't focus just solely on your likes or your followers, but delivering folks that are engaged with your social media with real content and real calls to action, and really kind of, scraping the data that we get from social media interactions and saying, okay, this particular individual is interacting with us on a daily basis, and more so when we post, when there are posts around a specific topic that they must be very passionate about. So, what is the potential now to engage deeper with that individual? So, I would definitely put them on my prospect list as someone that I may want to reach out to, again, for a closer connection. The other 5, so warm calling, not my favorite, but some folks are really good at this. So again, it's just, it's not your primary source of prospecting, but warm calling, again, can be a way, picking up the phone, reaching out, just finding out whether or not they're even willing to have a conversation about supporting an organization that's focused on the LGBTQ community. And at least just kind of learning that in the initial call so that whether or not they're right for prospect list. Again, planning for your call. If role playing is something that's good for you and you learn from, tapping into coworkers or peers for you to do some role play before you actually do these calls to kind of break down some of your kind of natural inhibitions or reluctance to do so. And then, of course, finding out what is your peak time for those calls. I'm not the most robust at 9 in the morning, so I would typically do those calls late in the afternoon, when my engine is fully revved and I'm feeling like I'm my most enthusiastic self. So keeping that in mind. Again, the obvious in prospecting is networking. A lot of us belong to chambers, belong to organizations where we have great networking opportunities. Just kind of remembering the 3 C's of networking, right? It's connecting, it's communicating, it's finding a cooperative space where you can collaborate. Oh, I came up with a 4th C, where you can collaborate together. And, joining groups that are relevant to your cause, again, where you feel that you'll have the best opportunity to prospect new donors, and sharing, and sharing your business card at networking events. Again, old school, I used to go to a networking event and I would have like 50 cards with me, Denise and Christine, and I would run around the room crazy, just like, here's my card, I'm doing great work, want to give me money? Here's my card, doing great work, want to give me money? So really just kind of running around the room, hitting everybody, as many people as I could with this, 50 or 75 cards that I brought. Again, not the best way to connect with people, and certainly doesn't support our cause selling cycle. In today's environment, I take maybe maximum 5 cards, and I really have a conversation with folks before I hand my card to them. So my whole approach has definitely shifted as I've tested out different methods and really learned more about what works most effectively in kind of the networking space. But yeah, I was that guy that would run right up to you and want to shove a card in your face all the time. But we learn from our mistakes, and we learn from how just kind of the industry itself has naturally evolved. Talked a little bit about websites already, right? How folks are engaging with your website. Is there an opportunity for them to sign up for news breaks or e-blasts? How are your videos engaging folks? What is their interaction? And then again, taking the time to utilize that data to help you understand if there's an opportunity for these folks to reside on your prospecting list, and for you to be able to take a deeper dive with them and a deeper level of engagement. And then focus groups. Focus groups are great, and when a lot of folks hear focus groups and they think of the 80s, when focus groups were really kind of emerging and becoming a powerhouse tool, for-profits as they were looking to implement a service or some type of a product in the market. Focus groups work great, in our local communities, and identifying prospective donors and finding out ways to engage with them. So I just wanted to throw that out there. You'll get folks that'll participate in focus groups. You can do them virtually. They don't have to be face-to-face. And a lot of times I would include some kind of perk, right? If you participate in this focus group, then you'll have a chance to win a $20 Amazon or Apple gift card. And of course, most of the time, making sure that those gift cards were donated so that there wasn't some negative impact on our bottom line in doing that. But a lot of great information that you can get from focus groups. Now, once we've kind of gone through this process, we've done prospecting, we've got this great list of individuals that we think will be a good fit for our organization. Before we move into the kind of the other phases of cause selling, we need to look at how we're classifying these potential prospects. So this is a great tool that we recommend as part of our Sanford Institute of Philanthropy curriculum. You've probably seen similar models. You may have created one yourself that works for your organization. But here's just again, a resource that can be utilized where you put in the name of the prospect. You then kind of circle within this Madden grid where they fall. I mean, do they have money? Are they approachable? Is there a desire? Are they a decision maker? Have you touched on their emotional points? And do they recognize that there's a need for the services that you're providing? So again, just a great way to classify and really help you recognize who out of your prospecting list are the ones that you should approach first, that are probably more aligned and have the highest potential to ultimately want to make a gift to your organization. So again, lots of great tools out there similar to this, but wanted to share and provide this one particular tool as an option for the folks attending our webinar today. So Class A, this shows you a little bit of the breakdown, and folks will be able to see this when they get the, when they download a copy of the presentation. But typically, A prospects are those about whom you have adequate information to make a presentation. They have the means to give, the authority, and they typically, possess at least 5 or more of the Madden qualifiers. The same thing with B. These have 1 or more of the qualifiers, and then C are those folks that are kind of your back burners that you'll get to once you've kind of exhausted your prospecting list with your Class A and B for potential donors. So again, I think it's just it's a great tool that's available available to folks to learn from and use. Then just kind of moving into this slide, so understanding your LGBTQ community's philanthropy. Great resources are existing known philanthropists and leaders in your organization. Set up these meetings, have these conversations, understanding your organization's history or lack thereof when it comes to prospecting and soliciting funds from the LGBTQ community. Document and learn from differences around giving, and are there, again, just looking at leaders, LGBTQ community business leaders in your community that you can sit down and have coffee with, and just pick their brain. Folks have no shortage of opinions, so give them that opportunity to share their stories and to offer their opinion on how you can get further engaged with LGBTQ donors in your own backyard, in large, small, or both markets, depending on what your service territory is and what you're challenged with raising, for your organization.
That's awesome, Tony. I'm just going to interject here because it reminds me of a funny thing I heard leadership say before, which is if you want money, ask for advice, and if you want advice, ask for money. Is that something that you kind of find rings true for that? I
would wear that T-shirt.
Excellent.
Yes, absolutely. And then again, just to kind of leave with with some potential prospecting resources specific to the LGBTQ community. Again, those recommendations, that top 10 list, holds true for whomever you're prospecting to support your organization. But as we talk a little more specifically about LGBTQ, donors, again, engaging in your local centers, being a part of their programming, being part of their network, and supporting, the opportunities that they have for networking in their events. You're bound to meet potential donors for your organization as well. We all know that folks give to multiple organizations for causes that they're passionate about. So, so meeting a donor at a center event does not mean that you're taking away from resources that the center will receive. Again, most of these folks are going to contribute to more than one organization that are supporting areas of passion for them. NGLCC, so the National Gay and Lesbian Chamber of Commerce, is a great resource for prospecting donors. regional, state, and national conferences like Creating Change and Outgiving. I know, Denise, you were just at, I think, at the Creating Change conference, right?
I was in Dallas, yeah.
Yeah, so, again, if your organization is in the position where you can invest in going to these national conferences, the state, regional conferences, you'll walk away with learning so much. But again, that one-on-one connectivity that you'll make with folks and the potential for them to become donors or supporters of your cause totally exists.
And Tony, if I can just break in real quick, I will say that
Please
at Creating
do.
Change, there's great value in Creating Change because so many funders go. They stay for different periods of time, but it's a place where a lot of us meet with our funders, and they also are there to participate on panels or whatever it is. So there is opportunity to do the I won't call it stalk, but the wait and see, wait and see if you run into them type of thing.
Absolutely. we all support a little friendly stalking in the fundraising arena, I think. So great, and I'm glad that you shared that too. And then, of course, the LGBTQ publications in our community. I mean, really taking the time to to look at those publications, who's advertising, who's writing articles to the editors. There's just a lot of great information and data that we can secure about potential donors through consistently looking at and just downloading these publications in our community. So again, just some additional resources and different ways that you can prospect in your own backyard. So that kind of wraps it up. For our piece of it today, I know I have thoroughly loved the opportunity to work with Denise and the team at Candid to put this together. We have a lot of opportunities as a community to work more closely together, to recognize the value of collective impact and collaboration, to share with one another our successes, and our failures. And I think today was just a great example of three organizations coming together and recognizing an opportunity here. So we'll move on.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony and Denise, so much. You can see I've kind of taken the controls back and starting to transition into the Q&A portion of this conversation, which is so exciting because we've gotten so many great questions throughout the presentation. So I'm excited to dive into those with you. So I'm going to go ahead and start by just posing an initial question, and for you, Tony and Denise, to think about your answer for a moment while I also share some additional resources as well. So the question I think for us to start with was, I think you were speaking to it towards the end of the presentation, but I'd love your thoughts on insights and additional advice on engaging LGBTQ donors who are giving to organizations that are not focused on the LGBTQ community. So for example, education, civic or cultural organizations, how can you engage LGBTQ donors for those organizations? So I want to give you a moment to just think on your thoughts to that question, and while you do so, want to invite everyone on the line to continue learning with us. We have a free self-paced learning course called Diversity and Inclusion, Walking the Talk, that you can take on your own time. And it is free and it's self-paced online, so you can take it from anywhere. And also know that we're going to be continuing our conversations in our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion series next month by partnering with Respectability to bring you another live webinar on including people with disabilities into your nonprofit or foundation. So definitely hope that you'll join us again for that. So without further ado, Tony and Denise, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how to engage LGBTQ+ donors for organizations that are working on a range of issues.
And I'm happy to start. there's the old adage that people who give can give to more than one thing. That we were always concerned about pilfering or taking away from one to do the other, and the truth is that most people that give can give to more than one thing. This is a nice actual setup for a report that I was going to talk about, because the reality of it is that the Movement Advancement Project did a study prior to 2015, and and mostly what they found was about 3.4% of LGBT people in the country were giving to the 39 largest LGBT advocacy organizations in the nation. So there was a big study done. It was called the LGBT Giving Project, to find out, or to explore, how do we get people to financially support the LGBT movement, whether at the national or local level. So uh, a number of equality federations and centers were engaged in this project, and the link just went out to everybody. But it really is a fascinating report, and it covered a lot of different things. But Tony had referenced letters, and this actually looked at social media posts and letters, and the difference in how things were phrased and framed. And so I really think it's about, how do we it's fine that people are giving to other agencies that focus on LGBT issues, but how do we get them to also really focus on LGBT organizations doing that hard work, and hopefully that will be of some help in doing that.
Thank you. Tony, any initial, I know towards the end of your presentation, you were speaking to different ways to find prospects. I imagine you would say that those can apply to any organization, not just organizations who are looking for funding serving the community specifically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, those strategies are true regardless, right? So it's all about relationships, and these prospecting strategies support any relationship that that you're interested in starting, for funding for your organization. So you're right. It doesn't have to be LGBTQ. It doesn't have to be, it works everywhere. It works in the Black community. It works in all communities of color. These strategies are the strategies, and work really well.
Okay, great. Denise, I think you both touched on at various points bequests, and how there's a kind of growing opportunity for bequests and trends in plan giving. And I'd just love to hear, we had a question come in from Andrew, just looking to hear more about trends in plan giving, where people want to give bequests, maybe some starting points for really thinking through that.
I know with one of the centers I work with, they've received a number of bequests as a surprise. They weren't things that they sought, but ended up getting them. So I think some of those are happening just organically. Tony had mentioned our fund, and when we're looking at community foundations like our fund and Horizons, there's one, I believe, in Chicago. But I think working with community foundations is a way that some of our centers are seeing bequests start to come through. And then, just looking at working with donors, and I think this happens more with centers that have development staff, or executive directors who have enough staff that they can focus time on it, to look at those long-term donors, and start having those conversations, because it's time, realistically.
Mm-hmm.
We have, or Tony, did you want to add?
No, all good. Thanks for checking.
Okay, great. We had a kind of a numbers question from Sarah come in, asking if either of you have a ballpark sense of how much money people are giving to equality in LGBTQ cause-based organizations.
I do not have a number, Tony. I don't know if you.
Yeah, I haven't seen a number, and the reason why there was that silence was I was just trying to think of what resource we might be able to find that. And again, I just think it speaks to the opportunity that we have as a community to, find some champions who can really kind of own this reporting space.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I can say that, Christine, in our 2018 report, the 2017 numbers, and this was based on 113 centers that were reporting, it was 226.7 million. So, and that's maybe half of our centers reporting back. So, it's certainly nowhere near the 427 billion out there, but but at least, but it's a healthy number. It just needs to get healthier and more
Yeah,
robust.
yeah, it's definitely not a small number by any
Yeah.
any count. So I know it was kind of an offhand quip, but we got a question from Jay about my comment on if you want money, ask for advice. If you want advice, ask for money. And they were just asking, it sounds like that resonated with you, Tony, and maybe with both of you. Would love to hear your thoughts on why you think that might often be the case of if you want money, ask for advice, and vice versa.
Tony, you want to take lead?
I'm thinking about it.
I mean, I'm happy to take a stab, and just from what I've always been taught, and that is that people love to be asked their advice. They love to be made to be seen as an expert in something. So it's kind of like having people talk about themselves, because everybody's favorite topic, including all of us, probably is talking about ourselves. It's great. So it's really, to me, it's always served as an intro, if you will, and it's also a great opportunity to get new leads. So going, and I use this a lot with current funders, and I know some of the development folks I talk to do as well. Going to either current or prospective funders and saying, I want to talk to you about this program. Is there anybody you can think of, in your expertise that might be interested in this, or what do you think of this program? Could you give me some feedback? I'm just interested in what you think. And obviously we want their feedback and their advice, but the ultimate hope is that they say, oh my God, that's a great program. Let me give you money for it. So, so that was how it was always taught to me.
Yeah, and the thing that I would say to that is it really is about listening with your potential donors, right? Because the alignment of passion, just the alignment of ethics, all of that has to be spot on for you to have the best possible relationship with your donor.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think listening, and I think it definitely resonated with me what you were saying, Denise, about people want to be leaders and talk about their particular perspective, and then we'll get more involved along those lines. It makes a lot of sense. We also had a question. So of course, people are tuning in to this webinar from across the United States, potentially even from outside of the United States, and got some questions around what recommendations you would have for organizations or people who are working in more conservative places, so maybe where there are fewer funders who are specifically focused on supporting the LGBTQ community. So I know, Denise, for example, you spoke about working with some maybe smaller community centers. Any advice that you'd have for folks in those areas?
That is a big challenge, and a challenge that a lot of our centers in those areas face. I can tell you there are some that have found amazing ways to do it. We have an extremely successful center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have really successful centers in a lot of places that people sort of just raise their eyebrows and say, really? And we also have some long term centers in areas that there is not a lot of support, and they get by on very little. Um, I think at that point it's really looking to those mainstream funders, and I'm not just talking about grantors. I'm talking about people, because
Hmm.
I know in a lot of those areas, and Tony, you may have heard similar stories, but it's the really wealthy straight couple that has a gay son or daughter, or a transgender
Hmm.
son or daughter, and so it's still means a lot to them to support an organization that would support their kid or their sister or niece or whatever it is. So um I think it's thinking outside of the box of just focusing on LGBT specific funders, and then working with other LGBT organizations, maybe in smaller areas, maybe in neighboring counties or states that you might be able to seek funding, uh, collaborative funding with, and coming up with some program that would work, or that would be replicable across the United States, that would be of value to a funder. So those are the things right now that are jumping to mind.
Yeah, and what you said was beautiful, Denise. And again, kind of reflecting on my experience when I was at the GLCC, one of our most active board members and one of our largest donors was a mom, of an LGBT, son. So her engagement was all about, I want to support this. I want to do whatever I can to make sure I'm creating healthy, safe communities for my son as he grows up. Uh, so I think
Yeah.
that was really important. That was really important that you shared that.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said about listening. I mean, we find this out by meeting people and just listening to them talk, and somewhere along the way, you're going to hear them say something about, because when we come out, we always hear everybody's story, whether it's themselves or a family member who's gay. So it's really just listening until you find that point that's going to
Hmm.
resonate with them.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And we also just in chat got an addition that one of the participants offered that in more conservative areas, leaning into kind of secondhand support in collaboration with organizations who are working on maybe related areas. So for example, arts funding, HIV funding, education funding. So that's funding that's a primary focus on another area, but it's inclusive of LGBTQ plus folks. Is that something that you've seen as well?
Yes, and I would say also, as mainstream funders get more invested in doing more work that bridges many communities, including the LGBTQ communities. LGBTQ organizations are invaluable to the other organizations in town, and can often start getting a lot of funding through pass through or sub granting or contracts. So yes, that's an excellent point.
Great. Well, thank you for adding that in the chat as well. Tony, you were speaking early on about kind of a pattern that there was less joint giving in plus LGBTQ plus kind of households. Have we seen a move to any more joint giving since the legalization of marriage nationwide?
I really don't know. I mean, that statistic was based on this 2017 survey that was done, where it talked about households. So I think that's a really interesting question. Although, I can share with you kind of similar to Denise. I mean, Ray and I have been together 27 years, married for 2, but nothing in the 2 years has changed since we got married. It's not like, it's not like there was this huge transformation in the way that we led our lives or the way that we couple, right? So,
Right.
I still kind of, at dinner I'll say, oh, by the way, I made this donation to the AIDS Ride today. So so marriage, at least again, I'm only talking from my personal lens. You know, marriage equality has not changed, or being married hasn't changed those dynamics within my household.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you're also kind of noting the date. I mean, a 2017 study is pretty recent as well. So, okay, great. We have so many good questions, so I'm trying to get to as many as we can. This is kind of an opinion question that came in from Caitlin asking, and I love your opinion. So hypothetically, if a Democrat is elected this year for the presidency, do you anticipate, or is there any historical data or trends to anticipate maybe a reduced amount of individual giving for LGBTQ plus causes, or in support of the LGBTQ plus community? Kind of sense that, okay, we're on better ground now. Is that something that you've ever seen in the past?
But I can't speak, statistically to the past. I'm always, again, it's an opinion piece, right? I'm always concerned about complacency. Always, always, always. So my level of optimism over that result could be overshadowed slightly by the pendulum swinging into this scary place of complacency. So that's just my opinion. I think when things look really rosy, we tend to kind of, kick our shoes off and put our feet up and get a little too comfortable.
Yeah, I agree. And the following opinion is mine only and does not reflect the opinion of Centerlink, which is a 501c3 organization.
Right, exactly.
But my personal opinion is that it frightens me that we will see the marriage opinion rebound, right? That oh, good, thank God, we've got somebody new in, and so everything's going to be fine, and people start closing up their wallets, and it is going to take a long time to undo what has been done. And there is still a lot out there that had to be done before this administration even got voted in. So I hope that giving does not turn around. I hope that people see that, but I think it's our responsibility at the local, state, and national levels to make sure that that message keeps being sent, and that hopefully the influencers that maybe had a little error in judgment when marriage was passed are going to be giving the right message and saying we're hanging in because there's still so much to do.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have so many great questions, and I think we only have time for about one more. So one is, I wanted to just thank you both so much. And two, kind of closing out with, I know both of you have offered so many practical tips and advice along the way here. And so I would love to just ask one closing question that's come in a few different ways, asking for you to speak to, maybe just off the a few really effective ways that you've seen people doing effective outreach to LGBTQ donors, especially new donors in their community. So how to really do outreach to find new donors in your community. Denise, for you, how has that worked for community centers, and Tony more broadly, any advice on outreach?
Sure. So I would.
Go ahead, Tony.
Yeah. So I was just going to say, it's all of, you got to be in it to win it. So let me just kind of start with that kind of dorky phrase, but it's proven very truthful for me. And just creating opportunities and portals for engagement. So if you have a nonprofit that's brick and mortar, so that you have an opportunity for folks to actually come in and see the work that you're doing. If you haven't heard of this before there's a fundraising strategy out there called the Benavon model. So the Benavon, so the Benavon model is a great fundraising model for those organizations, like I said, that have brick and mortar. There's a whole strategy there about, you meet folks, you invite them in for tours, and then how do you engage them after, during and after the tour to turn them from, from potential donors to actual donors. So I would say take a look at that Benavon model, but really, again, really examine what is your history of participation in the LGBTQ community? What is your history with LGBTQ donors? If you have a history with LGBTQ donors, tap into their donor knowledge and, and create a focus group or sit down with them and have a one-on-one and say, as a new donor to our organization, what was appealing to you? What attracted you to our organization? What has kept you here? And really just kind of expanding upon those responses and building on those best practices that have already proven successful for your organization.
Yeah, everything Tony said, agree. The Benavon model, a double amen to that. I think it's a really brilliant model. And at the smaller level, know how to talk about your organization, engage, figure out where the opportunities are with every donor, and make sure you follow through. Make sure you are constantly following through and thanking, and staying in touch with these folks, because the more they know about you, the more engaged they'll be.
Amazing. Thank you for closing out a really informative presentation with some practical next steps and models that we can all work with. So thank you so much, Tony and Denise, for bringing your expertise to us today. Thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar. You can see on our closing slide that I have a number of social handles. Social media, we talked about earlier as a ways to engage. We hope you continue to engage with us on social media at GrantSpace, at Candid.org. We would love to hear from you for what you learned today. What do you want to hear more about? Keep in touch with Tony and Stanford at Stanford Institute, and Denise and Centerlink at Centerlink. So you can see all of those handles right here on the slide, and we would love to hear what you walked away with from this presentation and how you're going to kind of go out and how it will inform your work. I also just want to reassure you that you'll be receiving a follow-up email within the next 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar, as well as a short survey. We very much appreciate your feedback, as it will help us plan future offerings, as well as for us to consider how we can continue to craft the best webinar experience possible. On behalf of our team here at Candid and our presenters, thank you for joining us today. And if you like this webinar, which we hope you did, we hope you will join us again soon, and have a fabulous rest of your day.